am in the game, a new year in real life. Kind of weird situation because New Year's Eve on a Friday, I didn't end up going dancing because of the New Year's Eve situation. And yeah, we got to open up with the personal crap for no good reason. And I still feel sort of the same lethargy, or not as deep as when I exhaust myself dancing, but I do feel kind of wiped out and kind of just want to watch videos all day. It's a pretty day. I actually went out and did some work putting a tarp up. One came down during the snowstorm, and I had to get a new one, and it finally came. All right. So what do we got? We got no more fog at this point, which I presume makes things a little easier. Davout's got some more troops coming in, but the Prussians have another corps coming in, actually. This Kalakut or whatever. I don't know the names. All right. Tricky decision right off. I looked over the entire battlefield, the orders, whatnot. And there's only one place where the French have cav in a position to launch charges, up here. I would love to get these cav out of the way. I'm looking at a medium and a light, and I've got 3 lights. If I commit 1 cav to each of these, probably force a countercharge, and then I can maybe bust up some of this withdrawal as well at the same time. And that seems like a promising avenue to take, so I'm going to go with that. Finishing up the French side of the 1030 turn. A little bit of desultory fire here. The big story here is failures on morale checks as I try to bring a line together to face the Prussians if they choose to attack, which they will, but I don't necessarily know that. Over here, advances across on all fronts. Shot out some artillery. That's at half strength now. That's going to be kind of hard to remember. Like with the cav, if you don't have a marker on it, so for the cav, you're doing melee, so you have to look it up. Normally you don't look up fire, but with artillery you have to be aware, is it damaged? And so that's kind of a tough thing to remember. You could put a counter under it, but again, there's so many counters on the board, it starts confusing things. And the infantry also failed its check. That was actually just coming from skirmisher fire. Elsewhere. So our cav charges succeeded remarkably well to begin with, which is to say there was no countercharge. So I launched a cav charge in this direction, created a couple of squares where I was able to bombard one of them with artillery from back here. Things have gotten more cluttered because we've had a couple of cav blows. So first one was, hey, I didn't want to face the squares, so I blew from there. And then the other one was, after fighting this battle, I would have been sitting in front of a square. I don't like doing that. I feel like that's an easy means of getting killed. So I blew away from that square as well. Here, however, we had kind of a standoff. So now I've got a cav deficiency, but I've got units of this other 7th Corps moving up, so it's not as bad as it looks, maybe. I don't know. You know, as long as I don't go into this hex, well, no, this hex I can charge into as well. So yeah, that's light cav, so it can countercharge pretty far. So we're still defended. You can get yourself in a lot of trouble playing with cav. If you're launching attacks to try to knock out the other guy's cav, well, I didn't succeed, and now they've got a cav arm that's stronger than what I initially engaged with, which was bigger than theirs. However, those reinforcements make all the difference. Not a lot in terms of firing, and not a lot in terms of recovery. We got Murat getting himself mingled up with Sol here. A lot of fatigue everywhere. That's just the way things are going, and that makes the forces have a lot harder time standing and fighting. I've got to take some time to rest, but on the other hand, I want to bring my units up into play. Napoleon went over to go chat with Ney. He's going to give him new orders, tire him out some more. You know. All right, on to the Prussian side. Cav actions taking place. Coming up here to throw these into square. If I recall correctly, we blew back. Over here did not work very well at all. We did dislodge the French cav that was there, but we blew back, and you know, it's just kind of not in quite the state that we'd want things to be. You know, neither side's really gaining the advantage, but we are covering some of the infantry moving back to join. I'm doing a slow join, so I don't have a lot of units that need to move very quickly. These are the only ones that really want to kind of march at full speed, so I'd rather not take fatigue for that. For whatever it matters. Might get more rest. Cav attack here. Again, blew back, but just, you know, harassing the French column. If I get lucky, I smash into some French and beat up Sol's forces as they're on their way up. Now it's time to do all these fires. Things I notice, and this is the abstraction and simplicity of this system as opposed to the others that I'm more used to. Casualties against artillery. Well, when it's gun crews, it makes sense that you'd be able to straggle recover them. But when it's counter battery fire, chances are you're hitting the actual infrastructure, either the cannons or their ammo supplies or something like that, that prevents the artillery from being easily reconstituted. I don't know what to say about that. I've got a half hit on this artillery. I'm wondering when it gets a hit, should I mark it special and consider it? Yeah, that's a destroyed gun. You have to treat that differently. You can't just recover fatigue for that. Maybe you can't recover fatigue for artillery, period. Which wouldn't, not fatigue, but stragglers. Whatever that term is here, it's like, where are the optional rules? I didn't find it. It's in the page. This troops reintegration. Yeah, it just says a unit. And again, it makes sense that you'd be able to recover gun crews because there are probably, first of all, there are men who could serve in the gun crew who aren't even trained on the gun crew to help support it. But then there's also, you know, even if you need a gunner specifically or one of the people with specialized capabilities, there are probably some of them running around loose because cannons tend to be captured rather than the gun crew getting wiped out in some cases. Or men who got shot are dispersed just like they would be from line infantry. So it doesn't seem unreasonable that you'd be able to recover them, but the question is whether or not I want to add that complexity of, yes, this is counter battery fire and cannot be recovered type of thing. Let's see. I did all the French fire here. I'll probably go back, fire the Prussians here, and then go deal with that map separately. I'm finding the game is getting to this kind of larger scale of a battle that maybe wouldn't be that big a deal. I mean, there still aren't a lot of pieces. There's not a lot of map to cover, but it wouldn't be that big a deal, say, in a CWB game or something. But with, again, the more complex interactions in a Napoleonic game with the charge situation, with some of the clunkiness of this system, although I'm beginning to internalize the rules a lot better again, I've gotten to the point where, like, you know, I need a break in between portions of my movement. So, like, I moved the Prussians over there, And then, well, I ran out of tea, which was the real kicker. But I did set aside, and I could see that happening just the way it did with like offensive à outrance. You know, as the battle gets bigger and bigger. Now, I think I have faced this over with the Waterloo scenario. I think what happened there was I ended up, I don't know if I've ever played the Bergy Waterloo there. I don't know which way it went there, but I know I was excited to get it because I don't have much in Waterloo. The big one that I have is the black box next to it. It's the TSR version of Wellington's Victory, and I haven't played that, but I'm not thrilled with that system, particularly for various reasons. Mainly because it's too painful for me. And Ney versus Wellington always bothered me. Anyway, again, I've never played that one, so I don't know. And Monmouth was fun, but I suspect with the integration of skirmishers and real cavalry and whatnot, it becomes at least as painful as Ney versus Wellington used to be for me. I'll get to those someday. But yeah, the amount of effort, you know, per map, I found myself playing out probably, you know, this is just trying to remember, but I suspect that when I was playing Le Retour de l'Empereur, when I did like a large scale movement or whatever, I would find myself taking breaks between the maps. And that's kind of what I did here, right? I did my movement. But the problem is everything's so integrated, right? It's not all integrated they're in separate phases, but the cav charges, you know, when you start looking at the movement, you're like, oh, before I do any movement, I'd better do cav charges. So looking at widely disparate sections, I may have to divide it up differently than at the movement phase. I may be doing almost a whole map at a time, and then go over and do a turn on the other map. It's hard to tell what's going to work best or not. I feel like I can't even take rally rolls. The Prussian morale is not that great to begin with. Two against. So, I mean, it's not terrible, but like this unit is a 7, which is pretty bad. 2 against, it drops it to a 5. 1 more for fatigue drops it to a 4. It has almost no chance of rallying. So we're seeing a lot of the Prussian units just fleeing the board. And remember, each commander can affect, you know, 1 stack, and that's about it. Here we're also seeing some of that cav. I just chose to blow the cav, and yeah, that maybe I'd be safer taking casualties or whatever, because they could just run off the map as far as I can tell. We've had a few that have routed off the map because that's a higher speed. Well, this has. I don't know about anything else. But yeah, we got stuff over there that's heading off. I have a hard time telling, you know, what the closest place is. I'm just going to start sending everything up that way because that's where I hope to disengage to. So, you know, if things do rally up there, it might be to my advantage to leave them there or something, just kind of milling around where they could be more easily picked up. And that gets us to, I guess, the 11th turn. At some point or another, I've got to roll these around, but because these counters only go up to, what, 14? And then, you know, what am I going to choose? Really, the 11s and 12s may be too much of a pain in the ass anyway, so it might make sense to get 1s and 2s on there. The thing is, the 1s and 2s are more likely to be on top of the leaders, so like doing a shift over would be painful. I don't know. I just don't know what to do yet. about that. It's not like it's a big deal. It's just, I guess I feel the need to move my mouth. And setting up for, what, the 11 a.m. turn. Writing some orders. Napoleon's telling Ney what to do. I want to get him up between those hills in kind of a reserve position. Everything all told between that and the guard, that is pretty much by reserve. But as I was looking, I decided to flip through some of these different rules, whatever, that are the special rules for this scenario. And when I happened to peek at the committing the Imperial Guard for whatever reason, and just saw the, if you don't get the demoralization level, it's supposed to create an increase of 10 to the morale level. Well, I don't even know what that means, right? That's kind of a meaningless thing. If you increase the morale numbers by 10, the French army would be pretty much invulnerable. But if you got rid of the word morale and replaced it with fatigue, it would actually make some sense, because that would be a -2 penalty across the board on all other units. That, and maybe also on the guard, that would be a reasonable penalty, as opposed to a superpower that by committing the guard you just make the entire French army pretty much invulnerable, or if you took 10 away from the morale, pretty much dead, right? I mean, anything else with 10 doesn't make sense. Anyway, that's what I think I'm doing. Oh, I know what I was doing. I'm looking up the reserves, the reinforcements that are coming in. I'm worried about timing issues in games, and I feel like there's one that sort of exists in this system, which is units that are disordered on one turn, they get a numeric marker for that turn, or in the case of Cav blowing itself, a numeric marker for the, I'm doing some charges up here where the Prussians failed their countercharge, and so a couple of units are getting hit after being demoralized, which probably wasn't wise. I probably shouldn't blow this. I probably should do it this way. How about that? Because I thought I could blow the Cav multiple times, and you can't, as far as I can tell. But yeah. So what happens is you get a numeric marker which tells you what turn you can try to rally on. Now, whoever goes first gets to rally earlier than whoever doesn't. And you might say, well, wait, it's staggered every other turn, whatever. No, it doesn't work that way. If you think about games like your terrible Swift Sword, and most games, you achieve a morale state like disordered or routed or whatever, and then immediately on your next turn, during whatever the rally phase is, you're allowed to rally. Here, there's a penalty of turns to the rallying, but they're of different size depending on when the rout happens in your turn. So, if a rout happens in the first player turn, well, if it's the first player, he'll get to rally at exactly 2 turns later, or in the case of being blown, 1 turn later. If the rout happens to the defending player, to the second player though, they're going to be not able to make their rally for an additional half turn, because it's fixed by the turn rather than the amount of time that you're, well, it's not fixed by the player turn, it's fixed by the overall turn, which means you might end up spending an extra half turn in rout. Now, that is always an advantage for the first player, who I guess is kind of technically going to usually be on the offensive in these scenarios. I'm not sure. Maybe it's always the French. I just don't know. But What it does mean is that there is a differentiation there, and one that I'm not sure is justifiable. You know, you could just say, well, it's always the French that go first, so they get a bonus. Well, there are battles that happened that didn't involve French, presumably. Not many. If you're playing something like Empires in Arms, though, you'll see combat that doesn't involve the French. But, you know, French allies like the Italians and whatever, should they have the same leadership bonus? Maybe. They were organized in a more modern fashion, at least in the early stages of the war. Later on in the war, though, the differentiation between the French and other nations becomes less. And I don't know, you've got like Russo-Turkish battles or whatever, but maybe you wouldn't want to handle them here, or maybe you would just give that advantage to the Russians no matter what, because they had a more modern army as well. But again, I usually like to see a balance in these things, and when I see an imbalance, then I have to say, well, I'm not sure I agree, right? And we'll see when we start hitting things like, well, I think Leipzig is the French defending. So when we see Leipzig, we may see that. I don't know about Hanau at all. But at Leipzig, we should be able to see the French, if they're still going first, that would indicate more a nationality advantage than an attacker advantage. Of course, I might be mistaken about Leipzig, but I think it was a French defensive situation, kind of like Dresden was. Who knows? Anyway, well, some of you know. This one doesn't. Way through the units, we're running into some other little kind of weird situations. Yeah. My skirmisher lines are getting silly because I have these huge things. Someone suggested cutting all the skirmishers in half. I don't know how I would do that. This way seems no better than using normal single counters. Lengthwise would make sense, but that's a painful cut to make without a scored counter, so I think I'll just keep going with what I have. It's not like I couldn't dig them out of other games, and I just hate doing that, not because I'll ever sell any of my games, but after I die, someone probably will, you know, or someone will want to acquire them or something. But, you know, honestly, it probably all gets shipped in one huge bunch to a game store somewhere with these are great, and you can, you know, whatever, because no one in my family cares. I don't have anyone else to leave them to, really. Anyway, what was I going to say? Yeah, Cav and artillery are always immune from fatigue, basically. Not from the effects of it, but from accumulating fatigue. Cavalry are immune if they're part of an infantry corps. But it means that Murat's corps has to be a lot more careful about cav charges and such not than my cav that I'm using up here, because it's not just movement. I can move full speed with my cav and it affects nothing, and that's fine. I can attack, but I can also melee with them, which makes them very, very effective with infantry forces. But it means Murat's got some tricky little weirdnesses. And I think what we're going to see is that the infantry-aligned cavalry is going to be making more attacks, because that big cav corps has to, like, recover itself to be ready for melee, you know? But anyway, that's what we got there. I think I've worked my way through most of these. I went with the 7th. I haven't gone, and the 5th, but I haven't dealt with the guards, and I haven't dealt with Ney yet. Again, it's getting pretty complicated, and it's not trivial. The way these counters are designed, and maybe the way my eyes work now, It's not trivial to recognize information from them. I've said that about the numbers and whatnot, but even just these little bars, these colors aren't all that different. Yes, my lighting is not the best in the world, but you know, it works well enough with some games. It just doesn't work well enough when they try to pack too much on a counter, and it's just a factor here. Big impacts from the French, moving Marat closer, but other than that, chased some Cav off into a route. Didn't manage to do much along here, although we did scare away some more gunners and the infantry that were with them. Scared some gunners here too. How about that? So that's not a great situation for the Prussians. And the Prussian army is, you know, just not able to withstand what Napoleon's bringing. So we'll see what the time limits are on this, but we got a lot of troops that haven't made it on the board yet, so I'm not even going to count over there. Over here, oh, and the French failed to rally most of their stuff, so they've got a lot of Fifth Corps running away, and I may throw Napoleon to try to intercept some of them and turn them around, because I don't know if that's all Cav. Yeah, it's all my Fifth Corps Cav that's running. That's not Cav, but yeah. Over here, Davout's doing a better job of rallying his forces. Still not perfect, and causing a little bit of damage to the Prussians. You know, they have such a slow move forward, especially if they're going to do their half movement. I don't think I'm doing that yet, but yeah, I mean, basically they can't half move in line formation. They've got 3 movement points, you know. Oh, so that will move us to the Prussian side of turn 11. I am out of turn 11 and 12 markers. So I think it's time to do the big swap and turn a lot of those into 1s and up there 2s. Just because there's nothing, you know, there's not enough counters to handle that. It's not a big deal. There shouldn't be any 1s and 2s that are real. The only problem with them is when there's 1s and 2s on the board, they're easier, well, anything under a 5, it's easier to confuse with the fatigue markers. I made some pretty good progress yesterday despite a kind of late start, and then fucked around playing online games late into the night, which meant I slept most of the day away. And this is the last day of the vacation of any level. You know, I go back to work tomorrow. And I feel pretty depressed with how little I got done game-wise. And certainly I got nothing else done. But anyway, what we look at here, the reason I picked up the camera, other than to bemoan my existence or whatever it is I do, is to take a little bit of a look into cav charges. So, making decisions on the Prussian cav charges. One cav did charge here. I could have done some damage, conceivably. This was the only unit within range that I could hit, but, you know, whatever. Instead, I blew my cav. Not much cost there. You know, even if the French come sweeping around this way, which they probably will, with given their orders, they're not going to be able to do much to that. The only thing is I shot my wad. You know, if we go over here, Prussians have more interesting ideas. Now, this is similar to what was going on up here, where I think the Prussians launched some charges against Cav to try to neutralize it. Except, I only have 2 Cav facing 2 that are stacked together. I could charge those 2 together. Chances are that will not go well if one of my Cav charges both of them. If both my Cav go against them, that might go fine, but there's no follow-up to that, right? And if there's no follow-up, it doesn't make a lot of sense to try to neutralize enemy cav. The reason you're neutralizing enemy cav is you have something else to do. And what's likely to happen, you know, maybe I win, maybe I lose, but I don't gain anything particularly from it, unless there were other units adjacent, then I could get, you know, breakthrough charges and stuff like that. Well, 1 hex breakthrough. But it seems pretty iffy to try to launch an attack there. And then I go over here, and while I could launch an attack here, I'm facing cav that would be able to countercharge me immediately and put me in really bad shape. And in fact, they're probably going to be able to do that anyway. I don't know how I'm going to get out of this situation. I'm not entirely sure why there wasn't a follow-through charge there, but I'm not sure there should have been. So anyway, we leave it as it stands. Sometimes, yeah, I'm concerned that may have been a situation where I had a follow-through that I didn't take, but that's allowed. Anyway. Those are sort of the first decisions that you make as you're skimming around looking for, ooh, I got some cav here. Now, what's up with that shit? That could help break up an attack and might be of use, and I wasn't even considering that. So now I'm going to look to that, because I didn't really see it there. I think we've got some definite opportunity to smack around Sul and Lan's corps and, you know, maybe slow down their advance, because our infantry is kind of struggling. Now, on the negative side of that, these guys would serve a useful purpose as countercharge forces if the French try to get too close. But the problem is they just throw skirmishers. Well, they can't throw skirmishers in front of me, because remember, those disappear when cav moves next to them. Well, they disappear when cav moves next to them. The question has already been raised, but I've resolved that. So they can't coexist next to cav. So yeah, I mean, I could form into square and inch my way towards the cav, but maybe it's better to just try to bust up that cav right off the bat. I gotta be careful though. There's artillery, and artillery has I wonder why my artillery is facing that way. Has a range in which it can do opportunity fire. Now this one is the only one that has it, but still there's definite danger. Now I can slip in this way though. Babble more, because I'm just about to launch one of those cav charges. This game would be very painful for me to play opposed. It's painful solo. But any of these Napoleonic tacticals. Here's why. I've done all this thinking already to set up, well, I'm worried about the gun line. There's a gun line that comes here. There's a gun line that comes here. I can go right down the middle between them. I figured out my attacks, etc. As the attacker, okay? As the defender, to make a decision as to what is going to try to form square, I have to understand the same protected situation. Because do I want to create a square over here or here in particular? And I've got to use all the same input that the attacker has just spent. Now, the attacker spent a few minutes thinking about this, or whatever. It's a little harder when you're looking from the defensive. There's some modifications to it, but I don't know why these guys jumped over. But the thing is, the defender would have to basically go through all the thinking all over again. So each action, you know, already I'm skimming through seeing, hey, where do I want to launch my attacks? But then all the potential consequences of those attacks have to be considered by the defender in their decisions to create, to try to create squares. Because if I let's say I admit that this is going to get attacked. Well, this could get attacked as a follow-through. Does that want to be created in a square? Now, this isn't something that an attacker really considered, but I have to look then at that terrain, which is, I believe, cultivated. It's actually difficult, but for some reason this chart doesn't have that. And that gives a melee penalty to the strength, which might be kind of a big deal, but this has a strength of 6, so I don't know. It's not going to be that huge a disincentive. But yeah, I mean, it's already a hard enough decision tree when I'm making the decisions on both sides to understand all that information that the attacker has already accumulated. Usually reactive decisions like that should be pretty damn light in a game like this. I mean, it's not like Twilight Struggle, right? In Twilight Struggle, if you've got a reactive card or something like that, I don't mind that you might have to agonize a little over it. But here, it's not a matter of agonizing. It's a matter of inputting the information and making the decision based on that information. And there might be many of these happening over the course of this phase of the turn. So you don't want them to bog the player down with too much consideration. It's already hard enough on the attacker. But almost the same decision factors have to go into what the defender is looking at. And they're not trivial to accumulate the information for them. It feels like the wrong amount. It feels like too much decision. Too important a decision is being made at too small a level in the game, for my tastes, to play opposed. Now, solo, I'm okay with it, because I've already done the work over here. I know what the attacker's doing, and I take that information into account. I'm not using any silly die roll type shit or something to try to simulate the failure of the receiving player to understand the situation. If it were something really clever, sure. But mainly it's pretty straightforward. It's just accumulating the information to make an informed decision is not a trivial process. And I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. And I guess this one's going to be going up after this player turn. The result of all that was we were able to form a few units into square. We were able to disorder one and continue the approach into that one. And now, we get an actual hit. Plus, we've done a little bit of ouch to, not ouch, but a little bit of harassment to the French line, slowing it down a little bit. It's not really going anywhere fast, but given how everything here is disorganized, we need whatever help we can get. And things that move forward, well, they're going to have to move forward in square formation if they're not worried about potential cav impacts. And I may have to shift some of my cav around to deal with that. Difficulties with the charge phase being its own phase as opposed to something that's integrated into the movement. NBS integrates cav charges into the normal movement along with all their melees. Hey, I want to advance here. Oh shit, I can be countercharged. Fuck. Now I've passed up my chance where I could have done this. Now I'm gonna do that charge because driving those cav off is really vital, and I've just got too much to pay attention to keep track of things. And I haven't done much over on this map, right? I did the cav charge with this unit, and then I moved this unit here. So I'm kind of like, hey bud, do you mind if I go back to the charge phase for a moment? This is really bad that I don't get this off. But it's not always apparent. So for example, this was hiding behind, it's back behind a disrupted unit. It's not absolutely clear that, it's so far back. Can I charge? No. Actually, I don't even know if this is a cav. Yeah, it is. I see that eight movement points, and I'm like, well, that could be an artillery unit, Horse artillery Moves 8. Big deal, but that has cleared up this whole problem for this flank. They can advance now. What happened was they failed their countercharge chance, which would have also cleared up the problem. Probably. No guarantee. The countercharge might have left the French sitting here, and then I can't do anything about them. But instead, since I failed the countercharge, didn't want to take a charge, I blew my cav, and this had nowhere to reach. It would have to continue and find something, even if it meant slamming into the square there. But there's no reason. So I moved my entire charge movement towards other units. I had no legitimate targets for charge left after this guy ran, and therefore now I'm in the post-charge state. I can't move that unit again. But now this whole flank is capable of operating against the infantry in a way that it wasn't while that cav was sitting out there. That cav was too much, I mean, you could sacrifice like one unit to the countercharge and hope it gets into square or something. That's another option, but I didn't really like that idea. I'm running into the obviously bad idea of charging guns. I already tried once, got repulsed, trying to move from here to here. I need to cover this flank. Why did I move up so close? Well, oops, can't take that one back, but at least not, I've had results come from it, right? So I'm gonna just have to keep sending waves of Prussians in to try to establish a flank there. I could just send one here, but then they're still in range to be shot at, and I only get shot once instead of twice that way, I guess. And at the end of this turn, and sorry for being so chatty, but I feel like there's so much going on in this kind of game that there's some need to express some of what's happening. Over here, the Prussians making a large-scale attack. Hey, I only got the one unit. The first guy who went in really, really badly chewed. Another one took a couple hits, though, and so it's not friendliness up here in this range of 2 artillery guns, batteries. But we're also outflanking the position, and I really think Davout's in a lot of trouble. It's just that Wilhelm is paying a price for it. Over here, and it may be too much of a price, I may have been better off not trying to push an attack. Over here, we've got what really looks still like complete disintegration. There's no infantry over here. This whole section, from here to here, there's no infantry covering. That's just cav trying to cover the center of their line. Well, I don't know what it is. It's not really the center. It's part of the left flank, but it's where the left flank's supposed to be, but the units that actually were on it have been dissolved largely. So we don't have much there. The death pile is growing. We got units that are routing off the map if they don't. This one gets a recovery chance. That's not very likely, but if it makes it, at least I keep the peace. If the other one I think is guaranteed to be running off the map, because that's at turn 12. Why is that routed so far in advance? It must have happened during the French turn this time, and then we got the route movement, and next turn's route movement I think takes it off the map before it gets a chance to rally. Certainly the next 2 turns will, and it's got both of them. Yeah, so now it's time for fighting. Firing to no real effect over on the Hohenlohe side over at Jena. That cav charge failed. Against disordered units, it ended up being a 1-to-1. We bounced. We got a 0-0 result with a morale check. Since we caused 0 casualties, we don't cause the extra casualty to the infantry. The terrain and everything helped from that. So we're flaying there. Rallies, this is on both sides, for the Prussians are tough. This is the real problem. These armies are brittle, the Prussian army. It doesn't have enough commanders to negate, whatever the morale bonus for the commanders isn't very high to begin with. So Hohenlohe has a 1. That's enough to negate the fatigue level that I'm at. I'm still at -2 for disordered, -3 for routed for that unit, which is gone, and everything's just running, and it keeps running. It's not easy to turn these guys around. You could just ignore them and leave them disordered on the field, but that doesn't seem like it's going to get you anywhere. Over here, things were a little more exciting. The Prussians got a fair amount of fire. I think they killed one of these cannons. They drove off one of these, an infantry that was up here in column, I think. One of these guys, this guy probably. The square that was here, they fired, it managed to hold its position. That wasn't great for it because then it got meleeed by both of these and just wiped out. Square is not the best formation to be facing the enemy and infantry in. And there's nothing you can do about it. You can't, this is what the cav is for. It's for making the enemy infantry really, really ineffectual. But we're facing the same issue in terms of rallying with Wilhelm, who's a little better. He's a 2. Brunswick was a 1 as well for morale, which means, yeah, you can cancel out the disorder, but we're still at -1, and it's still not a certain thing. These aren't terribly high morale units. An 8, some of these should have survived. One of them did make it, but a lot of them failed. Wait, not an 8, no. So this would go down 9. This would be a 6, which is not trivial. These are not healthy forces, and yet they're conducting an attack. However, that attack is gaining a lot of ground. The only problem is so much of my army's running away. Most importantly, those important cav. This is why starting the scenario with all those cav already disordered is probably a big deal. Because, you think about it, well, they're just disordered, they should be able to recover quickly. Yeah, for the French, that's generally the case. I get a disordered unit, I run back, I handle it. We got a few of them collecting up down here, but it's not too bad. And then I also have the extra army commander on play. The one thing I have going for me is a little corps coming in under this. It's not Kohlrath. It's Kalkruth. Don't know. Which, is a smaller force, so it should be able to be more adequately handled, in terms of rallying the units and keeping things in command as well. I mean, Hohenlohe has just a hellish amount of front that he's supposedly in command of, and there's not a whole hell of a lot I can do if I'm on one end or the other. And with units routing, I kind of want to run back and rally those units, but then everything's out of command. Over here, it's not quite as bad, but Wilhelm got himself 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's out of range. He was in range when he gave the command orders. This is not optimal. I'm going to be having to remember to give him the out of command penalties for that. Ooh, I get to get rid of this. I think I got rid of the other one. But yeah, it was kind of exciting doing the melee against the square. So why didn't I bring in these units? That's a good question. Whose units are they? I mean, they'll be coming in here, so they're not going to be in great shape. So this is, am I at the right turn is the question. Is 11 turn 11? Yeah. Huh. Oof. So let's take a look at the Auerstaedt reinforcements. Line units and light units and hussars. Whose are these? I guess they're still under the king. because they're not part of this guard. What the fuck's this? This is weird because it's colored different, but I think it's, I don't know. I don't know if it's the same command. I think it's part of this command. Okay. So these guys don't have a lot of movement available because it costs 2 extra to cross this particular bridge. What's this tiny thing? I wonder what the fuck that is. 032. Sharpshooters. That should be a light. Yeah. So that's going to be able to break off lots of skirmishers, which, you know, is basically breaking down the whole unit, I guess. So I can bring these in stacked. They're small enough. 1, 2. I'm not going to be able to cross. I mean, I would be able to. It'll confuse things, right? 3, 4, 5. Let's get them there, and I'm going to mark it that way. We'll keep the cav here. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is part of the main column, so it's fine. Okay. I guess we're good.